Welcome back, everybody, to What Do You Know with Nick and Devin. I am Devin.
And I'm Nick.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Nick, I have a question for you, and it's not anything crazy. It's kind of a, I don't want to say softball question because like that means like it's easy to hit, and softball is not an easy game to play.
Thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah. For everyone out there, softball, not that easy.
Sending this right to my sister.
That one's where you can.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to say it's a lob.
Okay.
A lob question.
Appreciate
lob
that.
it towards you.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go.
Appreciate the context.
Do you think the rebels committed multiple war crimes, blowing up not one but 3 different moon to planet sized battle stations?
Oh. Do I think they committed war crimes by blowing up
3 different massive battle stations? Now, I said this was easy question because like it wasn't about your childhood and anything like that. So like,
right.
Relative to my previous questions, it's easy.
It's not that deep. Right. I would say no, because it's as if like in war, you would kind of take out another opponent's headquarters, fortress, whatever, station, whatever. Sure. Now, if there was a... Sorry. It's not that like now if it was like they destroyed an entire planet that had like a battle station on it, then very different story.
Yeah, well, because like Star Killer's base in 789 or whatever episode it was in is the size of a planet. Like the Death Star 1 and 2 are size of moons.
Okay.
Star Killer base is the size of a planet. So it's like, to me, there's got to be some families on there, you know? Like, I know all 3 stations were technically massive weapons of mass destruction because of their, like, giant laser beams. But, like, there's got to be some innocent people on there, right? Like,
I'm sure, but my thing is that it's not as if those people were living on there because there was an outside, like, the Empire came in and took it over, and now they're stuck there,
fair.
Right? Like, your choice was to then go and work with the Empire on this. Now, oh my God, I'm not about to go into this conversation about Star Wars, but like some people might not have that choice, right? You know what I mean? Some people might have been forced into it. And however, like...
a lot of the Empire army was forced.
Right. But like, it is like you're on a battle station. You're not on a planet. Like, yes, it's habitable, but it's not...
You know the risk.
Right. Right.
Okay.
That's where I'm at. Do you think it was war crimes? No way, right?
Well, see, I'm torn because like we don't get to see the reason why I brought up like there could be families there because like we don't get to see the entirety of these battle stations. There could be some prisoners. There could be some children running around and all this other stuff. True. I don't know.
But I think about like my thing is that they're planet destroying weapon of mass destruction.
It needed to be stopped anyway.
Is on the planet, right? The battle station, right? So like there's other ways to defeat it, but the easiest way to shut like the greater risk. Yeah.
No, I'm inclined to agree because like the amount of planets that they destroyed using these battle stations, these massive weapons, I think balances out the destruction of
now Anakin killing all the younglings, war crime
because absolutely,
because now you're
that's like a Geneva Code thing.
1000%, because now it's not like there is a battle and there's kind of casualties of war, right? And there's, not to throw it up like this, but
truly innocent.
But like collateral damage. But this is attacking a people and just wiping out an entire like population of people because of who they are.
Right.
That's genocide. And
genocide,
that's
we can say it louder. It's okay.
Genocide.
There it is.
And that's war crime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
End of episode.
All right.
It was just like, as I'm thinking about it, like, of course, like parallels to today. And I was just like, are we going to get into this conversation? I'm going to pause. I don't know if we're We're
No,
ready
no,
for
no.
that.
That
Yeah.
was strictly staying in the Star Wars lane.
Star Wars lane.
Yeah, that's all we're talking about.
100%.
You can allude to whatever you want, but we're talking about Star Wars.
Correct.
So that actually brings me to my titular question.
Yes.
What do you know about the Star Wars program?
Nothing.
Amazing.
Literally nothing. Please tell me more.
So here's what's going to happen for the video, and I'm going to describe it
Audibly?
audibly to the folks that are just listening on Spotify or wherever. So this is what's going to happen in the video. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll just see this. So after I ask the question, the screen's going to fade to black, and then the text is this text is going to appear on the screen. Several decades ago, in this very galaxy. And then there's just going to be one note of the Star Wars theme, because that's like all we can afford. It's going to go. That's it. And that's all we can afford. We developed an idea that became dubbed the Star Wars program. And that's our intro for this episode.
Amazing.
So I hope that translated in your little mind eye that you can see this perfectly. If not, just go watch the YouTube video.
Beautifully described. Beautiful depiction. I loved it.
It'll look great in post.
Yeah. 1,000%.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the Star Wars program.
Tell me more.
It was officially called the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI, from here on out. And this strategic defense system was a proposed solution to potential nuclear attacks.
Oh.
It was later called Star Wars, based off of a speech given by Senator Ted Kennedy criticizing the program, but we'll get into that later. Yeah.
This is a real program.
It's a real program.
This is not in the vein of Star Wars.
No, this is in our universe.
Oh.
Sorry, I guess I should have cleared that up.
You said nuclear attacks, and I was like, Star Wars doesn't really talk about nuclear things. And then you said Senator Ted Kennedy, and I was like, everybody pause. This is a real program within the United States of America.
Yes, several decades ago in this very galaxy.
Thank you. Did you say that? You
I
said
did.
that.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
It was in the excitement and the hype of
Yes.
all these visual effects that we'll be doing.
I apologize. I was very excited about the Star Wars and it,
Intro? Yeah.
yeah.
Same.
Anyway, please continue. Well, go back just a touch, and then please continue.
Okay.
Star
Welcome
Wars
back to...
All right. So this was a program that was introduced by Senator Ted Kennedy.
No, it was criticized by Senator
Got
Ted
it, okay.
Kennedy. My next bullet point is where it came from.
Heard. I jumped the gun.
No, it's all right. This came about on March 23rd in 1983 during one of President Ronald Reagan's nationally televised speeches.
Do you think this was him trying to get into Star Wars the movie? He was like, I need to
I used to be
keep-
an actor.
Right.
I need to keep my SAG card going.
Right, exactly. We can turn this into a real thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know or need a reminder, Reagan was president for 2 terms from 1981 to 1989.
Yikes.
So that's what we're working with. Did that clear everything up? Are we all on the same
We are
train?
there. I appreciate it. In the same
Perfect.
galaxy, same timeline.
Excellent.
All of it.
All right, so when this idea was announced, it was during the later half of the Cold War, which was between the United States and the Soviet Union, and this idea was quite controversial. Why was it controversial?
Tell me more.
A little thing called mutually assured destruction.
That'll do it.
There's more controversy later on that I'll get into, but I wanted to talk about mutually assured destruction because that's kind of a key player here in the Star Wars program.
Okay.
So, mutually assured destruction, I'll say it one more time and I'll abbreviate it, MAD, or MAD, is a military theory essentially saying that if you shoot, then I'll shoot and we'll all be dead. Kind of simple.
Yeah.
We're mutually assuring that we both die.
Yeah.
So this gives us like this uneasy peace though. Like if we're both, or at least like nuclear peace, rather not. There's a lot of like microaggressions between the U.S. and the Soviets. During that time, but like we haven't blown each other up nuclearly. I don't think that's a word.
We'll figure it
out. Fix it in post.
Yeah.
So we have this uneasy nuclear peace going on since both sides know the destructive powers of nuclear weapons.
Right.
Based off of, the World War II and all the tests we've ran building bigger and worse bombs. So when Reagan brings up this idea of SDI, people feared he kind of disrupted the balance of MAD and doomed us all. He didn't, but like he dooms us in other ways later on, so it's fine.
It wasn't this instance.
Right. He tried.
Later episodes, we'll talk about those other instances.
He succeeded much later. It's
correct.
So, what exactly is this strategic defense initiative, and how does Star Wars tie into it? Let's get into it.
Thank you.
Like I said, it was an idea to defend the U.S. from Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, if you're in the biz, by intercepting them at various points in their flight path. So you have ICBMs are these land-based nuclear-armed missiles with a range of over 3,500 miles.
Damn.
So from here, where we're recording, it'd be like if we threw a rock or shot a missile to Lisbon, Portugal, or even the North Pole. So like there's some range to it.
If we could throw a rock to Lisbon, Portugal,
that'd be pretty sick.
That'd be pretty cool.
So these are just long flight path nuclear missiles.
Sure.
Scary. Only the U.S., Russia, and China actually have these. So that's nice.
Sure. I mean, makes me feel better.
Right. These are
at the time or currently?
Currently.
Oh, okay.
I believe. Fact check me.
Sure.
But definitely not at the time, so I believe currently, because China kind of got late in the game with all of this.
Got it. Okay.
These ICBMs are not to be confused with SLBMs.
Ugh.
Because my dyslexia kind of fucked me up when I was researching this. So SLBMs are these ballistic missiles launched from submarines. So they can fuck you up even more.
Wherever they want.
Right. They're hiding in the depths. The US, Britain, Russia, China, and France all have subs capable of launching SLBMs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Britain, France don't have it, but they have the capability of launching it. Do you know what I mean? Well, because they're allies. So
yeah. Like Britain, I get because they've always been famous for their navy.
Sure.
Historically. France is interesting, but France is always an interesting guy.
Oh, France. This is so off topic, but I'm watching Franklin right now with Michael Douglas, which is actually pretty good, but it is just Michael Douglas. Like, it doesn't feel like it's Benjamin. Anyway, not the point.
I was picturing the turtle, so go on.
Yeah, it's a live action version of Franklin the fucking turtle with Michael Douglas.
I'd watch it.
It's just caked in green. Yeah. But it is interesting because it goes into like the beginnings of the allyship of America and the U.S. during the American Revolution and like signing the treaty and all of those things. But it is really good insight into kind of how we fucked them over, they fucked just kind of these tri-powers like constantly like working with each other against each other and like going around in circles to now we're just friends.
Just a couple of friends.
Just a couple of buddies.
Nuclear missiles. So going back to talking about the SDI.
Yes.
This whole concept, the whole plan for it was to, it called for a couple different things. It was the use of laser battle stations on Earth and in space. Air and ground-based missile platforms would be in the rear defending major targets like ICBM silos.
Okay.
And then it would also call for sensors using radar, optical, and infrared threat detection systems to detect attacks that would be located on the ground, in the air, and up in space. So we'd have all these sensors in 3 different spots in our area detecting missile attacks.
Got it. Okay. I'd also like to think, at least this day and age, I guess I know that this is the 80s, but like in this day and age that even without those things, I feel like we have enough intelligence that we'd be like, we know when someone's shooting off a nuclear missile. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this kind of... There were chunks of this that got picked out and advanced further and like implemented properly.
I see. Okay.
To give us a better defense system today.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Yeah, we can detect. We have early detection systems and whatnot of missiles coming at us.
Right.
So like we have these. This was just a terrible time. This was a terrible plan.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. It was Reagan, so it was shitty.
Really bad.
Yeah. It just wasn't. I don't want to say it wasn't thought out, because it was thought out. There was like good intention behind it, but it just wasn't. We weren't in the technological space that we needed to be to implement this.
Yeah.
Now that we have a Space Force, who knows?
So many options.
So many options. So those are the things that this concept called for, kind of like this big sci-fi kind of stuff to help us defend against missiles. And these advanced space weapons, like I kind of just said, of lasers and whatnot, caused people to dub this the Star Wars program because it was so sci-fi to them. It was like, this isn't real. This is what I read in the novels or see on Star Trek kind of deal.
Yeah.
Or in Star Wars.
I was like, it's right there. It's right
there. So the problem with all of this, beyond the infringement of the peace brought by MAD, was kind of what I said earlier as well, was this level of technology hadn't been developed yet. Lasers, infrared, etc. did exist, of course, at the time, as tools, weapons, whatever, but not in this capacity that Reagan wanted.
Yeah.
So this type of defense system, or rather defense system at this scale, wasn't a new idea. There are some building blocks that kind of lead up to SDI. So since the end of World War II, and right about the time of the start of Cold War, the idea of a ballistic missile defense, or BMD, was being discussed by the U.S. military.
Okay.
I want to say the V2 rocket was invented by the Nazis at the end of World War II.
Right.
And so like, well, shit, like we got to figure out how to defend against that. We just figured out trenches.
Right.
We're done with trenches now. Now we have to deal with rockets.
We're done with trenches now.
So we have that. But the invention and implementation of longer range missiles meant that there could be a greater opportunity for a BMD system to be effective. They were like, we recognize the power and destruction of these missiles. Let's figure out a way to defend ourselves from it. And these missiles had longer flights. So that longer flight paths equals more flight time and higher altitudes, which means that it's easier detection by long range radar.
Okay.
So now that like you could shoot a rocket more at a safer distance, we also have more time to detect it.
Right.
In a situation. So from all of this school of thought came about a series of 3 different projects, all geared towards deploying a nationwide defensive system that would protect the country from Soviet ICBMs, because those were also in development. Space race, whatnot, was just how far can we shoot shit kind of thing. Now, the problem with taking a more defensive approach, however, was once again cost.
Sure. Okay.
There were reports, and the Soviets were also pushing out, that they claimed to be cranking out offensive missiles, quote, like sausages, end quote. Which I think is a ridiculous metaphor. And I can just see like an old Warner Brothers cartoon of just like a sausage machine and just missiles coming out of it.
That sounds like a really good political cartoon.
Right?
Honestly,
yeah. Like they're just stuffing Russian, what do they use? Rubles?
Yeah.
Into a sausage machine, and out cranks missiles. Come on. Easy.
Can you draw that up? I get that as a tattoo.
So in order to keep up with their growing arsenal, the Soviets' growing arsenal, estimates show that the U.S. would need to spend $20 for every $1 the Soviets spent in order to properly defend against a potential direct attack.
Oh shit!
So the Soviets were just all offense, didn't care about defense. They were just ready to strike, and the U.S. was like, if we need to keep up with this, it's going to cost a lot of money. So we might as well just ready for an attack instead of trying to defend ourselves.
Do we? And I wonder what because we don't get a lot of attacks here. You know what I mean? Very, very, very few.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's also kind of part of it. Is we were like, well, if we defend ourselves really well, and also just where we are in the world, like if we defend ourselves really well, then maybe less like what's what I'm looking for? Less chance of attack almost. Because people are like, oh, they have all these programs and things.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing that's interesting about the mutually assured destruction doctrine is that it only really accounts for larger government bodies.
Sure, yeah.
It doesn't account for a rogue individual, an accidental fire of a missile,
right?
Or a small group, maybe a small terrorist group, i.e. 2001.
Thank you.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't pick that up.
Yeah.
So like that's where MID kind of has its flaw, is that it's only looking at bigger government bodies. And so like after Pearl Harbor, we were like, never fucking again.
Yeah.
And so we built up this huge offensive military. So now everyone's like, well, shit, if we even try to poke the bear, we're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where our defense lies, is that we could fuck you up real good if we need to. And that's kind of where all of this was too, is like the Soviets are also like building up this offense, and the US is building up this offense to be like, if you poke us, you're dead kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I get that.
But then you have rogue agents like 9/11 happening,
right,
and you can't really defend against that. It wasn't something that we thought of until now. Now we have all of this national security stuff going on. Did you have a question? Did I answer your question?
I don't think I did. It was just more so that like I was just a curiosity of if the defense was intentional to say like if we defend ourselves well, there's kind of this illusion of like, yes, there is mad, but there's kind of this illusion of it's going to be very difficult to attack them, so why even bother? Right?
Yeah.
And I also think might be a discussion for a different episode, but like because of the vastness of our country, like if you were to strike an attack to cripple the US, even if you were to attack, let's say, DC, there are so many other governing bodies across the country that rebuilding that would be so not easy, but not as hard as like take Russia where everything's all in one place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or a lot of smaller countries that just have kind of a main hub. And so once that's destroyed, then we're done.
I'm inclined to agree with you, but usually, hypothetically, in the military sense, your targets when you would shoot something would be the like missile silos of your enemy country.
Oh, sure.
So, like, yeah, you could target like the head of state if you wanted to, but you would also be looking for the other targets that could shoot a counterattack.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's true.
And so like that's why they were kind of thinking of building up a defense of protecting the ICBM missile silos,
right,
using SDI or BMD
to make sure that we have the ability to respond.
Right.
Correct. Okay.
Right. And there's another thing about this, people that didn't agree with building up a defense that I'll get into a little bit later. But essentially it was like, well, you might be encouraging someone to strike first kind of deal.
Got it.
I'll get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
So it gets expensive to defend yourself is where we left off.
8 hours earlier.
Right. And in the 1960s, another problem emerged, which was the invention of MIRV, which pushed favoring offensive systems rather than defensive.
Okay.
Now, MIRV, M-I-R-V, stands for Multiple Independently Targetable Reentry Vehicle. Essentially, this is a giant missile carrying a bunch of smaller missiles that can all target different mission objectives.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you know, like in the beginning of the first Iron Man movie where like he shoots that rocket and like it spreads out and shoots all this other part of the mountain. Yeah. Just realized it's like really in front of camera. Sorry.
Like
Similar.
that. Yeah. I imagine it's like one big missile, and then it's got the little ones attached around it, and then they.
Oh, kind of. It's but they're all like housed in the main.
And then it's like drop.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
it's like it just like pukes them out.
And it makes that noise.
Yeah, and all of them are nuclear armed, so it's great.
And it's painted like the blob ghost in Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Does that thing have a name? It does have a name, doesn't it?
Slimer.
That's it.
So by the late 60s, after the invention of MIRV and whatnot, BMD lost almost all of the wind out of its metaphorical sail. The government and military had little interest. The public physically protested the idea, like people were in the streets and whatnot. And by February 1976, the only project to gain any traction from the original 3 was shut down after only 1 year of the base being operational. So like they got so far in the development that they even built up a base for it. And I was like, just shut it down. We're done with it. And to top it all off, there was also the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty that was signed by the U.S. and USSR in 1972.
Okay.
This treaty was put in place to limit the use of ABM systems, anti-ballistic missile systems.
To limit the use of?
Correct.
Interesting. Kind of goes into MAD a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone's really like stuck on MAD.
Like if you have them,
Right.
I have them. Yeah.
Right. And like the Cold War is so interesting on its own because like not only is it an arms race, but like it's an economic war. There's just so many like moving gears into this fucked up time period.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so this treaty was also meant to deter the continued production of nuclear armed missiles as well. Again, just everyone kind of like, cool your jets.
Yeah.
It's like a Mexican standoff, but like let's all just put our guns down at the same time. But if anyone wanted some trouble sleeping tonight, as of 2002, this treaty has been since terminated.
Nice. Well, because it was also with the USSR.
Yes. So the USSR, after it was disbanded, some of the Warsaw Pact countries were upheld the treaty, and they were like, yeah, we'll stick with it.
Got it.
And then everyone kind of like faded out, and then by 2002, the U.S. was like, I'm the only one left at this party.
I'm out.
I'm out. And that's when the treaty was torn up. So that happened. And again, I think kind of like 9/11, 2002,
definitely.
we were like, we gotta...
We don't know what's next.
Right.
So...
And we were trying to find nuclear weapons in the Middle East. And, you know.
Other people have nuclear weapons. Right.
Right. So that was that part. So with a defense system essentially mothballed and a huge push towards the offensive, how do we get to SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative? There's a couple different things in play, and they all pretty much involve Reagan, of course.
Of course.
So originally as classified information, it was later revealed that the Soviet Union had actually began developing laser weapons of their own starting around 1964, 1965.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's because they kind of heard something from the U.S. or their own scientists were like, this is probably something we should do. Like
Sure.
They've been developing nuclear weapons with us, so like they kind of know how to defend against them. And by the mid to late 70s, they actually had a successful tested satellite-mounted orbital weapon system. They were ready to go.
Yeah.
So we have that in play. Another thing that goes into it is that Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb. Now, the hydrogen bomb, don't ask me the ratio, but is much more powerful than the atom bomb of World War II.
It was, I remember in the episode, I remember that it was offered up. It was thought of during creating the nuclear bomb, the atom bomb, and it was brought up, and they said that's too much.
That's crazy. Yeah. And then they made it anyway.
They're like, oh, just make it just
right.
Yeah.
It is several tons more powerful than the atomic bomb. Fucking crazy. So Edward Teller, Daddy Hydrogen Bomb. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah, get in there.
He wound up giving a lecture in 1967 that essentially said to defend against a nuclear missile, one must use a nuclear missile.
Interesting theory.
And he also was advocating for there are other like nuclear based type weapons, whether it's not necessarily an explosive nuclear weapon, but like a nuclear powered weapon.
What is this? What's up with this man and nuclear shit?
It was the new energy source at the time, you know. God. It was like, there's so much potential here. Yeah. There is, but like, chill.
He said, just wait for Chernobyl. Okay. Calm down.
So who was in attendance to that lecture? None other than Ronnie Reagan.
Yeah, he was.
And this kind of started the seed for SDI in his head. So we have that. Then Edward Teller, Daddy Hydrogen Bomb.
Thank you. I was like, who are you talking about?
Speaks once again at a conference in Italy, and this is in 1979. Jumped ahead a couple years. Claiming that the USSR is going to get real ballsy real soon because of their new space-based weapons that they tested out.
All theory.
Yeah, and so like I said earlier, like all that, most of that information was classified at the time. So like no one really took his claims that seriously about the USSR. But at the same speech, Teller was also trying to sell the people on his latest nuclear-based weapon, the X-ray laser.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it was essentially a device that would use focused X-rays to detonate missiles above Earth's atmosphere. And so I'm not too sure if it was like, I didn't dive too much into it, but it was like, I'm not sure if it was a one-time use thing where like it would, this machine, this X-ray laser would kind of like explode and then like blast out its prongs at nuclear missiles flying in the atmosphere.
Okay.
Or if it would just target it and like fuck it up and blow it up.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, like hyper concentrated X-rays. It's not just like looking through it. Like X-rays are actually kind of pretty dangerous. That's why you only get hit with like a flash, a second of it.
Right.
So they're still radioactive.
That's why someone like runs behind a little like wall partition.
When you get a lead apron when you're at the dentist.
Amazing.
So that was Teller's conference in 1979, talking more about potential use of space weapons and lasers and whatnot to defend against nuclear attack. That same year, 1979, Reagan, still not president, but going to be, was briefed by Lieutenant General Daniel O. Graham. O is not like, it's not O. Graham.
Like
it's
O
just
period.
O period.
Got it. Oh, Graham.
Right.
Uh-huh. Got it.
So Lieutenant Graham Lieutenant Graham briefed Reagan on an updated version of Project Bambi, which is a ballistic missile boost intercept. That's what Bambi stands for.
Got it.
Now called High Frontier. Now, Project Bambi was originally proposed when Eisenhower was president, but development was canceled in 1963.
Okay.
So, like, this idea of building up a defense system, like I said, wasn't a new idea. It's always in kind of a development. How does better strengthen our walls around our country?
Yeah.
And, but this new updated version was essentially like a missile shield made up of ground and space-based weapons that could track, intercept, and destroy ICBMs.
Okay.
So, like, that kind of exists. Like, we have set up missile defense systems in allied countries.
Yeah.
I believe, like, some ships that are sailing
Positioned.
around,
Yeah.
like, have those. But, like, that's kind of, like, where you can see some of these bits and pieces being taken from this and implementing them now.
I see. Yeah.
And finally, like, the last bit that kind of adds up to SDI that, like, pushes us in that direction is that Graham thought that there was viable strategy in this new project, High Frontier. He wound up meeting with a group of like-minded individuals, including Teller, Daddy Hydrogen Bomb.
Of course.
And they met up several times to discuss new uses of this X-ray laser, knowing that if it was like developed, one laser could shoot down dozens of missiles with a single shot. So like super powerful idea there.
Sure.
And then Reagan actually wound up meeting with this group several times between 1981 and 1982. He's officially president, trying to convince him to consider this new defensive system, but they didn't have a lot of success.
Okay. Which, do we know why?
He was still kind of stuck on mad. He didn't want to spend the money.
Sure. Okay.
He's just into the office. Like, this would be a huge kind of controversial push into a different direction that the public wanted him to go.
That's fair.
But finally, in 1983, there was enough evidence of developing Soviet technology that Reagan was eventually convinced to move some funding over from the offensive side to the new defensive system.
Okay.
So now we can try to build up this system. So on March 23rd, 1983, in a nationally televised speech, Reagan announced SDI to the world. Quote, "I call upon the scientific community in this country, those who gave us nuclear weapons, to turn their great talents to the cause of mankind and world peace, to give us the means of rendering these nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete." End quote.
Interesting way to phrase it.
Yeah.
And also, no Reagan impression?
Well,
Did you forget your bowl of jelly beans?
my problem is that whenever I was reading a quote from Reagan, I just did my Nixon voice in my head.
Same. Anytime I read Reagan, I always hear Nixon.
Right. And it's just like, that's not his voice.
I know.
I can't do a Reagan impression because I don't remember. It's just Nixon in my head.
It's just Nixon.
And Nixon's so easy.
Just a lot of jowl shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, it is an interesting way to phrase it, of just being like, it's because it's a defensive strategy, right? He leans into like the aspect of this would ensure peace for mankind and all of those things.
Right. And make these nuclear weapons we've all been amassing useless.
Well, and like rectify yourselves for the creation of the atom bomb and all these things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting way to spin it.
Yeah.
Didn't go over too well.
Shocking.
So Ronnie ultimately thought that MAD was practically a suicide pact. At the end of the day, he was like, mutually assured destruction isn't correct.
Sure.
He wanted a better option to defending the country. He felt that if there was ever an attack, the president would have to either decide between an immediate counterattack or attempting to absorb the attack and then maintain an upper hand in the post-attack era.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like I get where he was coming from.
Yeah.
Because like it's mutually assured destruction is like fucked either way. Like this whole concept of nuclear war is fucked. Capital F. Capital F.
Yeah.
So like it's a tough spot.
What do you do? Do you absorb it or do you counter right away?
So like the thing about like all of this is like the idea is to, as soon as you detect missiles, you're launching your missiles.
Right.
And that's where the mutual assured destruction doctrine comes in.
Right.
So like I think it would, I don't have the knowledge, but I think it would depend on like how well our systems are protected, you know? Like would we even be able to counterattack? Like they're targeting all of these things. Do I have enough to counterattack?
I think it also depends on what they're targeting.
Yeah.
Like, is it, how many missiles is it? What's the end target? You know what I mean?
Right. Is it just going to be detonated above, like in, not the stratosphere, but like not on the ground?
Yeah.
And like cause a nuclear fallout that way with an EMP blast and fuck up all of our systems? Like, I don't know. I like defensive.
I prefer that too. Yeah.
Keep people alive. Hey, maybe don't shoot some nuclear missiles.
Just throwing it out there.
Don't do it. Throw those keys away. So he didn't like the whole doctrine of MAD.
Yeah.
Now, after the announcement, the formation of the Strategic Defensive Initiative Organization, SDIO, formed in 1984, and it was meant to oversee the SDI program. Kind of makes sense. The organization overseeing the program. And this was headed by Lieutenant General James Allen Abrahamson, USAF, and he was actually a former director of the NASA Space Shuttle program before all this. So he kind of like knew his space shit, you know.
Yeah. You know when you know your space shit?
Right. Not only was he a pilot, he was an astronaut and director of NASA Space Shuttle program. So he's like, I know some things about space.
Great experience. Yeah, great resume on that.
So on top of all of the previously discussed ideas like the X-ray laser from Daddy Hydrogen Bomb, SIDO wanted to add particle beam weapons, plasma weapons, updated nuclear-shaped charges, and others to their arsenal.
It just sounds so sci-fi.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Plasma rays. You're like, okay.
And like what I think is really funny is like we wouldn't be able to see any of these weapons because they're not within our visual spectrum.
Yeah.
Like you have in all of these sci-fi movies and whatnot, the sci-fi media, you see like the lasers being shot, like like the giant green laser from the Star Destroyer, the opening scene of Episode 4, Star Wars. And like you would see that hitting Princess Leia's cruiser, and it's like you wouldn't see any of that shit. This is all on the opposite ends of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're just like waiting to see if like we actually make contact, and then you just see something explode.
Now, first of all, bananas. But second of all, do you feel like if there's a high enough concentration of it that starts to meld into our visual spectrum? Like whether it's like refracting something or like picking up, you know what I mean, some sort of light? Or do you think it's just no matter what, we would never be able to see it?
I don't know officially. I think if there's like a high enough concentration, it'd probably like fuck up something. Right. Like there'd be like a little warble, like kind of like when you're looking at a hot road and you just see the lines.
See something like that. So it would be transparent, but you would be able to see kind of the outline or something of that nature. Yeah.
Yes. Some type of light being fucked up because there's so much going on.
Into one, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the concentrated laser. But like as I was talking as well, I was like, oh, I guess like you could watch it on like an infrared camera. Like you could see that.
But that's fine.
Right. Right.
Not as
I'm
cool.
not seeing a giant green laser and fuck people up.
Right. Then how do I know who's on which side if I don't know what color your laser is?
Exactly. Film has taught me so much.
So much.
Yeah, so they want to develop all this sci-fi shit for their arsenal. And SDI was focused on large-scale systems designed to defend against a massive Soviet attack. And so they wanted just to have... be able to, if the Soviets launched everything, SDI wanted to counter all of it.
Okay.
And so they concentrated almost entirely on these high-tech solutions like the lasers and plasma beams, whatever. And weirdly enough, though, a lot of these concepts were repeatedly rejected, even within SDIO. And it was like, no, there's no way we can feasibly do this, either technologically or economically right now. Interesting.
Okay.
So by 1986, just 3 years after Reagan's speech, many of the promising ideas were failing. Teller's Daddy Hydrogen Bomb, his X-ray laser failed several key tests in 1986 and was soon being placed in anti-satellite categories rather than anti-nuclear missile categories. Still able to use it, just be shooting down or fucking up satellites. The particle beam concept was demonstrated to basically not work. No surprise there. And several other concepts just proved not to be successful in their development or tests.
Got it.
At least at the scale, for some of them, at least at the scale that they needed to be at.
Sure.
So with all of this overwhelming technological and economical obstacles SDI faced, waned the popularity of the program.
That makes sense.
Critics claim that SDI disrupted MAD, mutually assured destruction,
right,
like we've been talking about, which was kind of like Reagan's whole reasoning behind starting up SDI.
Yeah.
Right, he thought it was a suicide pact, like I said. So he was like, "Fuck it, let's get out of it. Let's make sure we live." And like critics thought that it contradicted or disrupted MAD because it like possibly encouraged a strike by the enemy before SDI was operational. Like that could be an outcome of all of this.
Sure.
The other outcome could be that SDI actually encourages the user of SDI to do the first strike. They'll strike first, since it would allow the user to survive a lighter counter strike, assuming that the first strike destroyed most, if not all, of the target's nuclear weapons.
Okay.
So, like, that was a lot of acronyms and words. So, like, with the U.S. having SDI, like, well, if we fuck up the Soviets, like, our defense system will be able to defend against all of their remaining missiles that they'll counterattack us with. So let's strike first, weaken them. They'll fire back, but we'll be fine.
We'll defend ourselves.
Right. And that's what the critics were thinking that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Which, fair, I get.
Yeah.
It kind of just depends on, like, the mental... Not the mental state. The philosophy, not the philosophy even, the reason, I don't know, the political standing of whomever's in charge, like their
100%.
tactics.
Well, because I think our very rare, we don't often strike first. You know what I
Fair.
mean?
Yeah.
And so I think it would very, and again, I'm not an expert in military things. So like
Same.
if someone's like, we always do, like that doesn't feel right, but like, tell me. But I couldn't see an instance unless we knew of imminent plans that they were to strike first, that we might then take that stance.
Or we wanted their oil, or we were looking for nuclear missiles that we made up that were there.
Correct. Yep. See, we're more sneaky in the strike first.
Yeah.
We never make it appear as if we were the culprit.
It's never that blatant.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we would never just be like, and fire, just to do it. Right.
I get that. Yeah. Now, the Soviet response to all of this SDI stuff went fairly as expected. Not only did they see it as a threat to the USSR, but saw that this push for space-based missile defenses, that's hard for me to say, would make nuclear war inevitable.
Sure.
There were also comments that SDI would start an economic war, or further the economic war, I'd rather say.
Yeah.
But like coming out of the USSR, like they were like, this is going to start the economic war, not admitting that it already was an economic war. Because this defensive arms race would further cripple the Soviet economy. Because like what I said earlier, the $20 to 1 ratio, that cost ratio, would just fuck everybody up, essentially. And like, I keep saying like further fuck up the Soviet economy because like the Cold War was partially fought, for those of you who don't know, the Cold War was partially fought economically, with the U.S. using the arms race and other capitalistic ideas like introducing Western products to the Soviet people to push the USSR further into debt. They never really recovered from World War II. So like that was kind of part of the strategy of the Cold War for us, at least. Now you know.
2 episodes in 1.
And like I said earlier, though classified at the time, the Soviets were trying to keep up and come up with their own laser defense system. Yeah. This was later revealed to actually be mostly for show than real execution.
Not shocking.
Right.
Not shocking.
A lot of this was, just a big dick measuring contest, to put it lightly. A CIA paper that was declassified in 2014 stated, quote, in response to SDI, Moscow threatened a variety of military countermeasures in lieu of developing a parallel missile defense system, end quote.
Oh.
So essentially, like, the CIA believed that instead of developing a missile defense system along with the U.S., keeping pace with the U.S., like they have been for the offensive missiles, the Soviets, or Moscow, as quoted in the paper, was just coming up with just different military countermeasures, just coming up with different ideas to try to counteract all of this defense system stuff.
Got it. Versus building their own.
missile defense
right,
system, right?
right.
They were like, how we can't afford to build all these missiles.
Right.
What else can we do to have a similar defense structure?
Got it. Yep.
Now, overall, the Star Wars program, because that's what this is all about,
Right. Take us back now.
was by all standards a failure.
Yeah. Yep.
At its core, like I've been saying, like they've taken pieces and further developed them and put them where they need to go, like the X-ray laser going to satellite category and whatnot.
Yep.
But a whistleblower actually called out the large amount of, quote, wasteful spending on research and development, quote, at the SDI. He just felt like, as part of someone in the program, was like, this is all just a bunch of bullshit. We're wasting our time and money here. Fair. I mean, plasma beams. Come on. There was even a military officer who is involved in covert operations at the time that later was interviewed, their name not given,
Right.
About the program, and claimed that a major portion of the public information about the program was falsified.
Oh, I love it.
Right?
I love it.
Such Cold War bullshit. It's great.
I love that.
He was saying that stuff was made up and put out there to expose Soviet spies, but to avoid another Red Scare McCarthy era type period, the spies weren't prosecuted. They were just left, quote, dried up, eliminated their access, withering on the vine, end quote.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they were just like, here's this information. We know who you are. We're not going to give you any more information. You are useless to your country now.
Yep. Have fun.
Done.
Bye. Bye.
So that was interesting. And in that same article that he was quoted in, there's another quote that I'd like to read. Quote, nobody on the Joint Chiefs of Staff ever believed we were going to build Star Wars. But if we could convince the Russians that we could survive a first strike, we win the game. End quote.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of sometimes just about perception.
It's mind games, war games, you know?
Right. It is. It really is. It's just the perception of I can do better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got the bigger dick.
Right.
Come at me.
Right.
So, interesting. Let's finally get to the name Star Wars. Because there's all this talk, and it was literally only brought up by Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy was the one to call it Star Wars. He said the day after Reagan gave a speech, Ted called out the proposal in front of everyone as, quote, reckless Star Wars schemes, end quote.
He had just seen the movie.
Right.
Yeah. It was just like top of mind for him.
And so people just attached to this tagline. They liked it because the idea of using these weapons, like I've been saying, have only been previously seen in sci-fi media. Like it's just so ridiculous.
It's a good clip.
The use of Star Wars also added to the programs, like hurting the program's credibility.
Sure. Yeah. Because now it's
like,
so fantastical.
Right. It's just something silly.
Yeah.
Fantastical.
What was I trying to say?
I think you were saying fanciful. Fancy
so
feast.
Fancy feast. Fantastical. Yes.
So that's just where, like, it wasn't ever officially called the Star Wars program. It just became colloquially known as Star Wars program or Project Star Wars. And as expected, in 1985, Lucasfilm Ltd. filed a federal lawsuit against the use of Star Wars for the program.
Yes.
Like, obviously.
That's incredible. I love it.
So they, of course, claimed that the use in television ads and whatnot was trademark infringement against Lucasfilm by injuring the value of their trademark on the franchise and damaging the goodwill of the brand.
I love that. Sue the government for that. Absolutely.
We're a space opera, not a weapons system.
Come on.
Yeah. Better yet, the line should have been, that's no weapon system, it's a space opera.
Incredible.
Surprisingly, though, in November 1985, the case was dismissed due to its use of being non-commercial and non-trade fell outside the jurisdiction of trademark law.
No.
Yeah. I mean, like, the program failed anyway, so like it didn't really matter.
Fine.
Like, by the end of the 80s, it was like, nah. Like, by the end of Reagan administration, it was shut down, so.
But now Star Wars is attached to a failed government program.
Well,
Yikes.
Oh, well. And that is the Star Wars program.
Hey.
That's everything there. It was just this kind of rush to advance a defense system in an era that couldn't handle it.
Yep.
Bottom line.
But now we have missile defense systems.
Yeah, we have interesting new technology that has advanced from that program, like Project Excalibur, High Frontier. There's a lot of projects that continued development and got shuffled around to be better used.
I'm glad that what came out of it, definitely later. I would love to see some plasma guns.
Right.
I think that why not revisit some sci-fi stuff? But it is fantastical. You know what I mean? I think it was just kind of this craze of let's try what we can during a Cold War situation. You know what I mean?
There was such a push for technological advancement, constantly trying to grow and further our defenses and offensive capabilities.
Yeah.
And what I like to compare, though, to, like, because you have these hyper fantastical sci-fi, but then, like, one of my favorite book series, the Expanse series, also a show on Amazon Prime. This isn't an ad. Go read the book. It's so good. It's more of like a hard science fiction. So they use these kind of like X-ray stuff, and like it's all done through a computer. You're not like looking at beams being lasers being shot. They're like using beams to interfere with the signal from these missiles coming at them.
Okay.
They're using nuclear warheads out in space, which I think is crazy town, but like
Bananas.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
But like they're using this type of stuff that came out of SDI to use up in actual space warfare, which I think is cool. I think that's where the potential lies if we ever get there.
/ need to.
Right. If Space Force ever becomes a thing, more of a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Project Star Wars or Star Wars program, however you want to call it.
Whatever, you get it. Well, thanks for taking us through that. Yeah, I'll be interested to see, if it's ever reclaimed, if they ever bring it back, they dust off the cobwebs.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting, especially now that Disney owns Star Wars.
So
they'll win that lawsuit.
Right. Might not.
Maybe we'll call it the Star Trek program. I don't know.
They got no money on that side. Yeah.
So yeah, that's Star Wars program. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out. This was episode 51. Next week is episode 52.
The big one.
So that's a big one for all of us here and all of you listening. So thanks for sticking it all through. And we'll catch you next time. Make sure to like, subscribe if you haven't already. Follow us everywhere on the internet at WDYK_podcast.
Ooh, right into the barrel.
Right into the down the barrel.
I love that.
That's all I got for you.
Sweet. Thanks. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.